Thank you everybody for being here today. I'm Terry Nichols. I'm with the Watershed Programs Manager with the Montana Watershed Coordination Council. See our slide, this is the conservation conversation for today, is what's next for MWCC in 2024. Just kind of a fun opportunity to hear all the ideas that have been percolating at MWCC, especially now that we have a new executive director, Amy Seaman, who I'll be introducing in a moment. And just, if I can advance a slide, how do I do that? Just to thank the sponsor of our conservation conversations is Northwestern Energy. One of our board members, Jordan Tollefson, is I'm going to forget his title, water quality scientist, I think, for Northwestern Energy. And I'm going to stop the sharing so I can see my notes, and also so I can see everybody's faces. You don't have to turn on your video. You may be eating lunch. That's totally fine. But we do like to keep these relatively informal. Amy will give a really short presentation just so we can hear from, thanks, Stephanie. She'll give a short presentation, but we really do want to focus on the conversation part of this, knowing that this is about the MWCC network and MWCC's work, which is supporting all of you and working with all of you. And so we want to hear your ideas, your thoughts, and your perspectives on this as well once Amy's done with her presentation. And just to briefly introduce Amy, we'll do introductions for everybody in a minute. But to briefly introduce Amy, as I said, she's our new executive director, just started in August. So amazingly hitting the ground running here. Before becoming executive director, Amy worked for Montana Audubon. She also served on the MWCC board for 6 years, ending in 2021. And Amy comes to MWCC with over 15 years of experience supporting bird, wildlife, and natural resource conservation efforts in Montana and the West. And she's based out of Helena, which is where she's lived for the past 10 years.
So I just wanted, you all probably know our staff, but I just thought it'd be really nice to have us together. We're a small team. So when I thought about, we need a new business card when I started and all that, I was like, hey, why don't we just put one together? We should all be a team and we can point other people to whoever we need. So this is our staff again. We're a small but mighty staff. And I feel really, really honored and lucky to have two people that have worked in this organization and in this network for so long and know it so well. And as well, just feel really lucky to be coming to a network of people beyond the staff that have worked in this watershed communities for a long time and really have a strong appreciation and desire to see things go well in Montana. So I'm joining that contingency because I too have just been a part of the watershed community basically as long as I've been working in Montana. So just a tiny bit of my background with Montana Audubon. And yes, to Terry's point, yes, I am a total bird nerd. That's exactly what my background is. Most summers I'll be doing field work for many weeks of the year and getting to go out and around. But what's been great about that is I've been really able to see almost every corner of Montana and learn about just the various resource challenges across the state and how sometimes similar they are and sometimes different. But to that point, when I started even at Audubon, it was just really great when this job opportunity came around because MWCC meetings were one of the very first things I was told to go to as a Montana Audubon employee. They were always seen as super important, and it's just awesome to meet that network and still be working with a lot of those people almost 10 years later. So that's just a tiny bit of my background. And then I did serve on the board with MWCC for 6 years, so I was able to get familiar that way. So again, just super excited to be back in this community with a lot of people working together. And I will give one small side note, don't spread this too far. Some of you probably know, but I do, from my experience working in different biological or terrestrial biology communities and, sometimes big mammals, big predators, et cetera, there's a lot of competition between biologists or oh, my species is cooler than yours or this, that, and the other. But I really appreciate in the watershed community that I feel people see the forest for the trees, as they say, and are able to keep this really great holistic view on watershed health. So very exciting to be here. And I'll just start. I'm just going to dive right in. But what I've been doing quickly is settling in. Of course, it's been actually today is 3 months exactly. So it's been a lot, as you can all imagine. Zach has helped transition a lot, and he's going to actually present on leadership transitions later in January. And the reason I say that is because, of course, transitioning, it takes a lot of time to settle in, and it takes a lot of support from your staff and board and supervisors to actually help you settle in the proper way. And so we've been trying to focus on doing that the proper way. And of course, for me, that's included making sure the office in Helena is feeling open and ready for business. So this is our little downtown spot on Fuller Avenue. And I put a little picture in here of Lauren Sinclair. So one of the things that I was able to do right away is actually bring in renters to our office, because it's actually quite a big office. So part of settling in was like, gosh, can we reduce our operating costs at all? It's going to be a little difficult, but we ended up working out with the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West, and they do a bunch of the ecological monitoring for the Bureau of Land Management. So now we're going to have 2 of their staff in our office. And what's really cool is they are watershed mapping and wetland mapping the entire state and have just tons of resources there. So I think it's going to be a really great a way to build community, but also great partnerships. Oh, look, I jumped over what was right in my middle. Of course, I'm doing admin work all the time. We spent weeks just getting all our passwords organized, and just for sympathy, I figured I'd let you guys know that I was wrestling with the ASAP government program to get paid for a while, but we figured those things out. And then, of course, just learning all the QuickBooks for our organization and some of that really basic admin work that, of course, is important to put time in early. And then some of the other settling in is just trying to feel like part of the community, especially as we talk later, trying to become more of a community fundraiser and thinking about fundraising a little differently is like, how can we really feel like part of Helena? And so we just this past Friday actually hosted artists at the Helena Downtown Art Walk. And it was, we probably had like 40 people or so, and sold some artwork. For those of you who may recognize, Jill actually was downtown. Jill Feldhusen, who used to work for MWCC. So it was super fun to see her and just get people in for different reasons. And as well, as I'm settling in, I'm sort of getting re-inspired by all that MWCC does, because of course I wouldn't have tried to work here if I didn't think it was a place that did great work. But when you actually, sit and read through the annual reports, the presentations, and all the work that the staff has been doing, it's kind of one of those where you also still take your own step back and realize just how far our work has gone, how many people we've connected with. And then because of being a board member previously, and maybe Sierra, it's great to see you because her and I served together actually. And what's awesome to see is there were so many things MWCC has thought about as a board or staff and then followed through, right? And that's awesome to see a group that's really slowly picking its path and then making the things happen that they want to see. So I've been trying to get re-inspired by all the work that we do. And of course, culminating with just how much funding is actually moving through the Watershed Fund, which is quite incredible, and certainly one of my most pressing jobs. Like basically every day we think about the Watershed Fund and growing it and how it can support the rest of the network. And so I've been thinking a lot about how we frame the Watershed Fund, how we talk about it, and especially how we talk about it when it comes to financial development. The other things I've been doing to get inspired is just, of course, trying to get a lot of face time with everybody. So I've just been traveling as much as I can and getting out into spaces to meet all the partners. Another really cool thing is just really knowing a lot of people through my work at Audubon and being able to transition that to new relationships. Or as you all know, there's so many different agency staff, being able to, it's like one step over and kind of knowing everybody a little bit already, but making sure to put faces to names. So we did the Nonprofit Association meeting, Montana Lakes Conference, was just a couple of weeks ago. And then a really unique opportunity with the Montana Association of Conservation Districts. We hosted a scholar with World Montana, probably my second week of work or so. So just trying to get re-inspired and connected. And so that's a little bit of what I've been doing. Of course, just learning about all our grant opportunities and figuring out what is all the work that we're going to be doing for 2024. And so this next part I'll go through kind of quickly. because I do want to make sure there's time for conversation, but it's just sort of our quick overview of what actually is happening in 2024 and through the end of this year. Of course, you're here now at the conservation conversations, but those are something that is going to continue to happen and will continue to hopefully be a new tool for especially coordinators to, we had Tracy went on last month about how does they prioritize projects? Like, what are other groups doing to really answer a lot of these nitty-gritty questions that you all deal with? So we're going to continue those monthly. This February, we will have our annual meeting. It'll be a little bit, obviously, less than 1 year and probably virtual. We're still toying with a lot of ideas on how we want that to go. So I suppose any feedback generally on that is good, but we do have a lot of good annual meeting notes, and we'll be in contact about that more. One of the biggest pieces, and what I do want to talk about during our conversation, is this April 2024 a fundraising and development workshop that we've been working on, and that was started before I came on, just to really bring people together around creative fundraising, storytelling, like strategies to have your finances in line, how to actually get grants out the door, all types of grant work. And so I do want to go back to this when we're at the end and talk more about what you all would want out of that. And then our ideal goals are to go back to having the fall every other year watershed tours and every other year watershed symposiums. So those large statewide events that many of you have been to. And as usual, the other things that we want to continue in 2024 is just pushing money out as much as possible through the watershed fund. And this is one, of course, taking a couple of years break, we'll say, from MWCC, coming back and seeing all the different opportunities provided through the watershed fund is really, really quite incredible. And some of those are actually going to start coming out next month already. So for the end of this year into next year, we're going to be putting out an RFP December and tentatively early December for the collaborative forest planning grants through MFCN. And then later in January, the non-point source professional development funding. And some of you may have seen this in the past where it was like strictly connected to the Big Sky Watershed Corps program. In 2024, we're really excited that we're actually able to open up the professional development funding to staff beyond, or people beyond Big Sky Watershed Corps members. And then there will still be continued project funding available again in February for Big Sky Watershed Corps members, and this is non-point source reduction work, and then general capacity funds for Big Sky in July 2024. So a lot of the funds that you're used to seeing, we're going to be able to open up again, which is great.
Yeah, and Amy, can I just say something real quick about the collaborative?
Yeah, please.
I assume everybody knows who this is, but just in case, but MFCN is the Montana Forest Collaboration Network, and we've partnered with them on a number of things over the years, recognizing that forests are part of watersheds. And so this funding is actually going through them, but they've partnered with us to actually administer it. So yeah, thanks.
No, thank you. And then there is our portion of the watershed fund that is, I like to call it hopefully less strings attached funding. This is actually funding that MWCC, we are independently raising, separate from state entities ideally, but basically we're trying to have this fund be what we administer, and we create our own request for proposals every year. You've mostly seen it coming out in the fall, and we have had to punt to early winter this year, just trying to make sure that we have enough funding to actually give out in the watershed fund. We're really aiming to get up to $35,000 to be able to subgrant. And so what you see is the little sub bullets here. We're trying to build that, the capacity fund, or sorry, the capacity in the watershed fund through private foundation grants, community giving, and donor development. So it's a really different process than us trying to get the state funding. And I want to talk about this just a little bit because what it will result in is that you may see in our outreach materials that things are phrased a little differently. So for example, we are doing the Giving Tuesday campaign this year, and connected to our 2022 RFP, where we had really committed to basically like, if you don't get funded in this round, we really want to make sure that we're trying to get you funding that you need, that we know that there's need out there to be filled. And so working on that, we're actually trying to say, like, we had 2 specific grants that aren't filled, and hey, Bitterroot Watershed Partnership, we had promised to fundraise if it didn't work out, and it didn't. So guess what? We're privately fundraising for you. So now you may see their name alongside of our Giving Tuesday asks. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I know there's a challenge, and MWCC will probably always face a challenge, right? Picking winners or losers within our watershed groups, making sure we are supporting groups equally and as much as possible, but also staying true to like these promises and new ideas. So it is a bit of a new way to fundraise, and hopefully it can be well received. And I would encourage watershed groups, not to feel dismissed by this, but that, okay, when is their ask next? What can we create next to do that for them as well? And so where that really fits in is, how do we also organize community giving around the state and individual areas? Part of the reason I put the community giving on here is Helena has a really wonderful Helena Area Community Foundation. And not only do they raise money for groups in Helena, but they also convene us monthly to actually meet with other development directors and meet with other executives that may be having the same problems. And so it's just a kind of an encouragement to get out in your own communities if there's something like that out there. Kira?
Yeah, Kira.
I just wanted to reiterate Amy's point that we're trying to provide a specific ask with our Giving Tuesday campaign. And so we needed an example of a capacity support project. And the Bitterroot Water Partnership had a really great application that we just didn't have enough funds to support last year. And that's why we chose them, because we already had that kind of like in our pocket. And so I think it's just a really great opportunity to showcase the great work that our partners are doing and that we provide the support to help complete.
Yeah, thank you, Kira. And I definitely welcome any questions about this at the end of like the process, or what you could see as potentials for doing more of it. We do have, right now we're waiting on 2 private foundation responses for we can put out our RFP. So everyone cross their fingers for us. And we can talk more about that if you have questions for sure. I better keep going. So I'm looking at the clock too. So this is a slide you all are very familiar with, but mostly to say is we are not eliminating any of the resources that we have right now, the Watershed News Coordinators Forum Resource Library, or monitoring resources, but we do have a new resource coming out in January. We don't have a finalized the title yet, but maybe some of you have been emailed or will be emailed about commenting on a new potential fundraising newsletter. Or not potential, it will be a new fundraising letter. We have the layout and everything, so we're hoping to launch in January. But we haven't fully decided on how often we want to send one out, etc. So we are open to ideas there. But a lot of our work is going to move towards creative fundraising, local fundraising, and I think encouraging watershed groups to work together on private foundation grants. And I really hope with that we can help the state see in a lot of their processes why private foundation money is so important to not leave on the table to act as match to state and federal grants. So that will be a great work in progress. And as well, Rachel, I'm glad you're here. I'm very excited. We are part of a sub-grant for the Flathead Lake Biological Station, EPA Region 8 grant. And so we will be embarking on a lot of education and coordination connected to a new pesticide stewardship program for the Columbia River Basin, modeled after work that's been done in Oregon. And it's going to be a great opportunity for our staff. Terry and I are going to be working closely on this to support FLBS basically as much as needed, and to make sure we are connecting the watersheds, connecting monitoring. Her and I talked well about, it's just, you don't want to see redundant things happening when money is short. So hopefully we can organize well together. And it's awesome to see WMCC on here as well, because with their pesticide award, I'm excited that we have support, because then we can actually, coordinate with them as need be too, to really, that whole region is just going to be exciting for the next couple of years. So we'll be diving into that soon. And then as well, one thing I would love to hear about is the need for education across the state. And it's one thing that we have talked about with WMCC and the Montana Waters Clearly Connected campaigns. And this is one of my more grand picture pieces that's not fully formed, but I feel that, watershed groups constantly need education support and constantly need education materials, capacity, etc. But it's also a position that if a watershed has, it's likely to turn over quickly, or they just may not be able to stay long, or, have the resources to create something from start. And so I think a number of us have really been enamored with the Montana Waters campaign, and especially after the Montana Lakes Conference, where a number of us were just like, this is a great campaign. What can we do to really support it across the state? And so a lot of my thinking now is like, how can we really support statewide education so that watershed groups have a baseline of what they need from us and can tailor it to their locations as need be? And if they are able to get more capacity, then great, we can hand over some more, like a package to them, or just more support that they can actually run with. But, every meeting you basically hear like, we need more education, we need more engagement, we need more inclusion. And so I thought like, well, WMCC really does have Western Montana very well. So like in this particular campaign, maybe Montana Watershed Coordination Council can really help bolster sort of the eastern half of the state, but really help bolster this to be a statewide message. So that is definitely a work in progress. Early schemes are happening. And then this is my just last amorphous slide before we end, is that when I think of our MWCC network, I'm trying to think about the capabilities. This picture of the circle on the left side for you guys, it's supposed to be me, my leadership abilities. It's supposed to say, okay, I can take this, and we have a great strategies. We've had the Watershed Fund, which is our great innovation and our great theory of change. And I will say out loud, even though Zach's here, we have a fantastically organized and active board at the moment, and we're ready. We're all moving, in the same direction. So what do I take? How do I take all of that we have as a MWCC, merge it with our collective network, which is this light bulb, which is all of the education that you all have. And I've tried to talk to so many coordinators just getting started of ideas that, people have put in what we now call our think tank instead of our parking lot. What about health insurance for watershed groups? What would that look like? How could that ever happen? Is that a reality? But it's in a collective thought and question for years and years, and it gets recycled and comes back, So something like that, trying to pull in all that data that you all have already mined and applying it to our network. And one of the only models I can liken it to is how new podcast collective groups have come out as more and more independent podcasts come out. So the independent podcasts would be like our watershed groups, and then MWCC acts as a collective where we really recognize that each watershed group has its own strengths and weaknesses. Like some of them are probably really good at administering grants. Some of them would probably rather never look at a grant, but would rather engineer the water project itself. Or they're really good at getting people in together in meetings, or they're really good at marketing. And so I think, my end goal would be not to try to get so divided that we can't do anything well, but over time, I do feel like we've been asked to be a lot of things for groups, so why not try to be those things? And so some of it is reflected, in this fundraising workshop, for example, like how can we share what we've learned from groups like Montana Nonprofit Association or other large nonprofits that have very sophisticated finance tracking? What can we learn from that? And then kind of roll down the line to other smaller groups in where they need, like to make sure MWCC's processes are sophisticated enough that any watershed group can look to them where they need support. And we could say, oh, actually, here's our policy. You can take it and use it the way you need. So that is a lot, but I better stop talking, right? That's not too bad. I do have this one last slide of just staying connected. We do have a great social media presence, thanks to Kira, which has, again, is something that other watershed groups really look to. So as part of that sort of collective support, how can we even support with learning, social media, AI, all the fun stuff. So yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. This was I can't even remember who originally came up with this idea, but it just seems like a great opportunity for people to get to know you and see where we're headed as a little midpoint. And also I love the reminders, and I always try to bring this up too, that there is MWCC, the organization, and there is also MWCC, the network, right? We do not exist without all of you and without all of our partners and people working across the state. And we, to the point about these conservation conversations we've had, I know Rachel has led one of Rachel and Abby led one for us last year. We really rely on your ideas and what you're doing to share with other people, and sometimes for our own, oh, maybe we could be doing a better job of that here at MWCC. It really is this we're all in this together kind of situation. And so I like to remind that yes, we are doing everything that we can to support all of your work, and also you're supporting our work and you're an integral part of that. So yeah, let's move over. Amy, do you want to stop sharing and we can see people's faces again, and just open it up to, again, questions are great. And also, what are your thoughts? What did you like about this? Do you have any ideas for what your organization needs? How this dovetails with conversations we've had in the past about what we need for Montana conservation. And we'd love it if you just raise your hand or jump in with a question. If you're still eating lunch, you can also drop something in the chat.
And I'll add too, especially would love to hear. So Kiera, Terry, and I are all formulating the fundraising workshop right now and have a lot of different ideas, everything from bringing storytelling in to actually having our accountant. That was one thing I didn't mention. Actually, one of our new settling in was getting a new accountant. So that's been a really awesome admin experience, but she has a lot of skills that we could try to share with groups. So, do people want strategies or do we need to do grant writing? And I think we got a lot of good feedback from an earlier watershed survey that we did, but we definitely want it to fit people's needs. Or if you've been to other really good fundraising workshops.
Don't all jump in at once. Yeah. And I will say, I think it's okay if you didn't actually look at the annual meeting notes. I know but that was one of the things that people stressed at the annual meeting that I think I lose sight of, having been at MWCC for 5.5 years now. That it's oh, well, we've done this training, but there are always new people coming in. And a lot of the feedback we got at the annual meeting was no, we need another fundraising workshop. No, we need another storytelling. Keep doing this because things are always changing, right? The fundraising and communications landscape is changing. And also new people are always coming into the network. So yeah, questions, thoughts?
I could share a couple thoughts as a new executive director coming into the Clearwater Resource Council. There are so many moving parts and pieces that have to be juggled all at once, especially in a small organization, that it becomes very challenging sometimes to just know what you don't know. And so I think this organization is phenomenal. I think it's an awesome leadership and function. And I think that what I've seen with Rachel and the Flathead Biological Station, it's exciting to know that there is such a good strength and framework of people working together for Montana. I think Montana is very fortunate to do that. But having said that, I think there's some challenges that I particularly face. It's probably not unlike others. One of them is capacity funding. Seems to be a lot of project-related funding that gives funds to do specific results, but this idea that it takes a lot more than just a few indirect costs to be able to cover full organizational costs. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how others are doing that and accomplishing those larger funding mechanisms. What I'm trying to do is elevate this organization from project-related thinking to ecosystem resiliency and build a strategic action plan over multiple years that identifies major programmatic benefits, and then use that framework to do fundraising for capacity from larger scale type of funders. And any resources that can be available through the Montana Watershed Council there would be very, very helpful to me.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that capacity piece. And it is one of the, I mean, it is the main driver, I would say, in the back of my mind of where trying to grow the MWCC capacity grants. So we, under the umbrella of the Watershed Fund, we have the capacity funds that are, you know, aligned with, like, let's say MFCN, the Forest Collective Network, Forest Collaboration Network, and then like under Big Sky Watershed Corps, and they're all in these little pots of money sort of, and that's why we have been focusing now on trying to grow our MWCC capacity fund pool, because it is the least strings attached and the easiest to actually go to capacity and to all of those things that you mentioned, because I agree it's the same difficulty for us. And as well, I've been trying to really think about, when I talk to a private foundation, that making our story about the Watershed Fund a little bit like bigger than just it being a fund where, you know, if we were doing money that you would consider unrestricted funding for a nonprofit, like if MWCC is doing that, most likely we're doing it to raise funds for the Watershed Fund, to figure out what project needs are, to network, to find new. It's like almost all Watershed Fund is our like general operation. So trying to build the picture of what it takes to make the Watershed Fund a little stronger, so that when I present it to funders, they see that as the work versus just the overhead, right? And so I think some of that is storytelling, but I also think, Dave, it's great that you, like, with getting strategic documents in line, I do really think that, and I didn't talk about this at all, because actually MWCC is right at the end of our strategic plan right now. And so there is thoughts of like, what does a new ED do? Like, it's hard to just start brand new 3 months and do a whole new plans. So contemplating like maybe an interim, like how do we do that? But what I think it is so valuable, because when you go to a funder and you have your strategies for ecosystem resilience written out, they'll see that it's couched in something, right? So when you write a grant to them or ask for money, you're not making it up, and or just, you know, coming up with something. It's like you'll show that you had a long thought process through it. And I just think that stuff's been so powerful. I'm hoping to lean on an experience I gained under working on the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program. The strength of that program had is similar to the strength that any application with a watershed restoration plan behind it has. Is like there is a plan that is signed off, that either a third party or someone said, hey, like MWCC is not crazy, this is gonna work, or like, hey, CRC is not crazy, this is gonna work. And getting that kind of like external verification, I think, really helps. So I mean, as far as, yeah, having plans that are board approved and thoughtful, I think really is a great launching point. I don't know if others on the call one to speak to that at all? Because I've definitely been thinking about that, like the strength of internal documents versus being like, well, we're working from the state water plan or something, you know, it's very much couched in expertise of sorts. Does that help at all?
Certainly, I agree entirely that I think the strength of being able to pull from other organizations, their strategic thinking and documents is also very helpful in trying to assemble one. One of the concerns I have is in ecosystem resiliency, the community portion or the social cultural component is very crucial to not only gaining support, but also funding on annual giving and so forth. I'm trying to launch a chain of lakes community planning effort or community empowerment initiative. So as part of that, I'm trying to say programmatically at one level to fundraise for community empowerment. And with that funding, then I intend to work, we have got 6 lakes on our watershed. So then we'll be working with the landowners that surround those lakes to develop, try to create collaborative partnerships with those lake landowners to drill down to the level where those people have concerns that are relevant to maybe consistent across the watershed. Like in this watershed, septic tank pollution is a really big deal. And the real question isn't so much, is it happening? The question is what are you going to do about it? And right now, one of the big thrusts is try to put in municipal type wastewater treatment plants. The problem is it doesn't work in diffuse rural communities where they're so dispersed, the cost of doing such things. So you end up looking more at a localized framework. And I think that's an issue that's very consistent across anybody that has lakes, is this issue of septic tank contamination and how we can build on that to strengthen landowner, individual, and small group type of contributions to the partnership of trying to restore and retain resiliency.
Yeah, does anyone in the WMCC at all want to talk about septic at all? It is so interesting how much that has come up in my first couple of months. And I did actually lobby with Montana Audubon at the legislature for a number of years, and the septic issues and septic setbacks, and that actually was always the one that I found most intriguing and like just so interesting because you don't think about it being out there. But it's in every single community. And I think, Dave, you are not alone at all in dealing with that. That was like, do you guys have any more to add to that? Because I think that's so interesting. But the other piece is the homeowners association. That whole concept blew my mind at the Montana Lakes Conference, because it's like a whole other subset of groups that actually is quite powerful for conservation that I did not even think about. And so you have a really unique opportunity. And I definitely think there'd be a funder willing to get to that level. I mean, that's just such a great level of community. It's also an added layer of how you can get work done, right? Because it's basically you can't move forward unless you sort of get some of their blessings. And so that's a really complicated thing that I think more and more groups could also end up dealing with.
One of the things that I think that happens when you start focusing on community empowerment is, like you said, there is a whole nother pool of funding available outside of just watershed and water related. When you start dealing with community empowerment and community engagement, there's a whole pool of funding there. And the other one that is very powerful is the world of volunteerism and volunteer leadership within communities. So I'm trying to, when I say elevate our strategic thinking as well as our strategic fundraising, to think of expanding the volume or the number of areas that we can target for our funding support outside of just traditional straightforward water.
I think Emily, I don't know if Emily had a thought on any of this.
I did, yeah. So I don't know, Dave, we have a conversation lined up for next week, but I'll say some of this now in case anyone else finds it applicable. But when you're talking about septic issues in your watershed, that's something that we have heard a lot in our group. And actually, so Amy was talking earlier about the biological station and their big EPA grant for pesticides. We also got a similar, from the same pot of money, an EPA award, but focused on non-point source pollution issues like stormwater and septic leachate. And so we will have a pot of money over the next 6 years, have some funding for increasing awareness about septic systems, potentially starting incentive programs to get residents, give them a financial incentive to perform the maintenance that's necessary for septic systems, really just kind of like elevating the bar a little bit. If there are communities that can tie into sewer, we'll have some funds that could support that. But we know that that's a need. We recognize that need too. And so hopefully we'll have some money for that, as well as that education piece of just trying to connect individual actions back to water quality and to their environment. So I'm glad to hear you that's something that's a need for you, and hopefully we'll be able to collaborate and coordinate in the future.
And it also feels like to me, and I know that's maybe the needle you're trying to thread, Dave, and Emily with WMCC, is that it is that kind of nexus of capacity and project funding, right? Because this is on the ground work that is going to improve water quality, is going to make watersheds healthier. And also it is inherently, you need staff capacity to reach out. It's education and outreach too. So it kind of, hopefully that is a thing that can get us to that more capacity funding, where we convince people that really this capacity funding is getting on the ground work done. So that's the holy grail, right? Great. Any other thoughts from people? And I guess, yeah, we are, now that Sierra has left us, we are almost exclusively a Northwest Montana crew here. So yeah, any specific issues to Northwest Montana water quality since Abby's? But yeah, those sorts of issues. I didn't know if there were any other thoughts or questions.
Well, I was just, oh.
No, I was gonna pick on you actually, so go for it.
Well, since I work in the whole state, so and I'm not specific to a region, I think we do easily really forget about Eastern Montana and the water resources out there. And so I just hope that we can use MWCC to kind of bolster like more watershed groups and helping watershed groups get started in Eastern Montana, since we have a smaller number. There's one newer group that they're kind of that borderline Eastern Montana, but the Clarksburg Yellowstone partnership just got started, and they're doing great, and they're applying for grants, and they have a really good board, and they're getting really connected with the ranching and agricultural community. And that's something that for Western Montana groups too, in my thought and opinion, to thrive, is they need that agricultural community support. And if they don't have that, that's, in Western Montana, because the Forest Service or the National Park Service own like larger chunks of land, you might be able to more coordinate with the Forest Service over private landowners and still see impactful change, but they don't have that luxury out east. So how do we work on a larger scale? So I would just hope that it's really easy for us to get focused on Western Montana, that we really start to think more about how we can support our rural communities out in Eastern Montana, especially since water with droughts and everything is becoming more and more of a topic. So
thank you so much for that, Abby. That's definitely something that we think about, because it's just true. Even when I look at I hate saying this in public, but it's true. When we look at the watershed funds, most of the funding is going to Western and then a little bit Central Montana. It's not, but Eastern Montana, just, little bits here and there to conservation districts. But it is a problem. I mean, I know there are fewer people out there, but there are not fewer resources. There are not fewer problems related to climate change, you know? And so how do we get more funding out there, and how do we, you know, without pressuring everybody to form a watershed group, which would be ideal, right? But how do we support those communities more, because they don't have support? And that is part of, I know, the work that we're going to be doing. Oh, did we get? Okay, we're not talking. I know there's another grant that the other EPA grant, the environmental justice grant. I don't know the status of that.
We're still waiting.
We're still waiting. Okay. I don't know if but anyway, there's potential for MWCC being a little bit more involved in helping get funding out to their underserved communities. And we're hoping that's
I think something that we can consider, and something that I've had to consider, is how do we work better with conservation districts out east, because they're kind of the stepping stone. However, they don't have the same staff capacity that Western Montana conservation districts do. And maybe that's something that we can consider as MACD and MWCC, sorry, have like a way to coordinate with different groups, and starting with that ballpark. And then there's, you know, I think as we can, you know, bolster some capacity in Eastern Montana, or start education out there, then maybe that would help. So yeah.
That's
I do appreciate hearing that. One of the similar to the forest collaboratives, my background, like recently with grant writing, was for a lot of Eastern Montana ranchers. And I think, so Terry and I, we've talked about the same situation where it's like there's a bunch of range management funding that is totally water adjacent, or like watershed, right? It is watershed work. And I've seen ranchers that keep ephemeral wetlands like way wetter because of how they manage their cows, right? So we definitely see that overlap. And so I have reached out, you know, to Rancher Stewardship Alliance, the Rancher Resource Network. And so having some of those previous relationship, I'm hoping does kind of translate into maybe not necessarily a pass through for range, but a way that we have the watershed groups be able to get some of the funding that's out there for range management because of how much it impacts the watershed. So I definitely appreciate that. And my hopes for the Eastern Montana education is I think it's like kind of packaged itself up for a private foundation ask. It's really nicely teed up with all the materials, and going forward as a capacity building thing that once we built it would be more sustained, I think would be great. So I'll definitely connect with you more on it, because I would love to hear too, and I don't think we have time right now, but more about where like you have good hot spots of volunteers already in Eastern Montana, or if not, and
well, that's the hard,
that's probably
that's a hard thing. And Rachel and I have, you know, talked back and forth too on how we can engage Eastern Montana, because so it's a challenge for everything. And but I don't think the challenge shouldn't cause a lack of trying. So yeah.
You bring up a,
Can I adopt that as can you say that again? The challenge shouldn't cause a lack of trying.
Yeah.
Dave, did you have a parting? We got to wrap up here, but Dave, did you have a quick parting thought?
I had a question. This brings up the question of directory, or how do you contact or know who you can contact as it relates to this? It seems like there's just so many parts and pieces to this whole framework. I was just wondering what there was in way of directories.
Yeah, well, I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now for our watershed directory, which is conservation districts, watershed groups, other organizations working across the state. But it also makes it, several things we've said have made me think about the Montana conservation menu, which we haven't even gotten to talk about, that we're working on with MACD right now, because that is going to have grant resources, not only for watershed groups and CDs and organizations, but also for private landowners. And so just to this point about getting more resources to Eastern Montana. Anyway, look for more information on the Montana conservation menu in the new year too. Just dropped a chat for the watershed directory, and I was going to drop one more for our conservation conversations, because we have a couple more great conversations. Well, I guess just one more coming up this year. We're going to have 4 different watershed coordinators talking about how they managed to get from being a really, really tiny watershed group to a slightly larger, but more sustainable, more to the point, like sustainable watershed group, how they've done that. And then in January, Zach and Amy are going to be back on talking about leadership transitions and how we can do that better as conservation organizations. They have had some great learning experiences, and also Zach has been a great resource for Montana Nonprofit Association. So we're going to revisit that topic on leadership transitions in January, and all of that information is on the, oh, nope, that was the wrong thing. I will drop the correct chat in one moment. But yeah, on the conservation conversation webpage that I'll share. And yeah, and we are pretty much at time, so I don't want to keep people any extra longer. But I just want to thank Amy. If Amy has any parting thoughts, I'll let her end, but thank Amy for doing this, and thank all of you for being here and sharing your thoughts and ideas.
No, I appreciate it. I didn't know. Rachel, did you have any last thought that you needed to?
I think you guys
One more
have
minute.
covered things nicely. I definitely agree. Abby and I have talked a lot about how to engage more in the eastern part of the state through MMW. So I can't, unfortunately, engage those folks for the pesticide efforts, but hopefully that will change in the future once we set the groundwork and be creative to find more resources. But we're always looking to expand our MMW reach to more places in the state, and just happy to engage and support efforts in general.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the MMW is definitely one of the pieces I have a lot more to learn about. So, but I'm excited to hear more about that. And yeah, thank you, Abby, for coming too. It's good to see you again. I appreciate everyone joining. It's good to see you all. Have a lovely rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.